The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Donald Trump, President of the United States of America. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. And I don't mind making this speech without a teleprompter, because the teleprompter is not working. I feel very happy to be up here with you nevertheless, and that way you speak more from the heart. I can only say that whoever's operating this teleprompter is in big trouble. Hello, Madam First Lady. Thank you very much for being here. And Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, First Lady of the United States, distinguished delegates, ambassadors, and world leaders. 6 years have passed since I last stood in this grand hall and addressed a world that was prosperous and at peace in my first term. Since that day, the guns of war have shattered the peace I forged on 2 continents, an era of calm and stability.
Welcome back to Chockatable Media. President Donald Trump's speech at the UN General Assembly in September 2025 was characterized by a strong focus on national sovereignty, a sharp rebuke of globalism, and pointed criticisms of the United Nations itself, Europe, and climate change policies. Here is a summary and analysis of the key points. Key points of the speech. Critique of the UN and globalism. Trump launched a full-on assault on the UN, describing it as a feckless, corrupt and pernicious global force that is not even coming close to living up to its potential. He questioned the UN's purpose and criticized it for writing strongly worded letters instead of taking effective action, while championing a vision for sovereign nations. Immigration and border control. A central theme was the denouncement of uncontrolled migration and open borders, which he claimed were destroying a large part of the free world. He urged countries to close their borders and expel foreigners, presenting the U.S. immigration crackdown as a model. He controversially accused the UN of leading a globalist migration agenda and funding an assault on Western countries by providing financial aid to migrants. He warned European leaders that their countries were going to hell due to their immigration policies. Climate change and energy policy. Trump reiterated his rejection of climate action and renewable energy. He called climate change a con job and the carbon footprint a hoax. He vehemently attacked the green energy agenda and green scam, warning that countries pursuing it would fail. He advocated for a reliance on traditional energy sources and boasted of expanded drilling in the US. Trade and tariffs. Trump defended his decision to raise tariffs, arguing that the US was targeting countries like China that had broken the rules and plundered the factories of nations that had followed them. Foreign policy and conflict. He touted his administration's success in ending 7 UN-endable wars in his first 8 months, a claim that has been viewed as an overstatement, and called on nations to unite to end the development of biological weapons, proposing an AI verification system. On the war in Ukraine, he criticized both China and India for funding the war by purchasing Russian oil, and argued that Europe had not cut off Russian energy enough. He proposed that strict tariffs could end the war quickly if Europe adopted them with the US. On the Gaza conflict, he called on Hamas to release the hostages and criticized those in the UN seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. Analysis. The speech was widely analyzed as a globalization of Trump's familiar America First domestic agenda and rally rhetoric, transactional and bilateral diplomacy, Analysts noted that the speech suggested a preference for a transactional and bilateral approach to diplomacy, rather than the multilateral cooperation promoted by the UN's core values. Direct attack on allies. His strong and often inflammatory language was directed particularly at European leaders and the values of the transatlantic relationship, challenging two of the UN's core issues, migration and climate change. Thematic focus. The speech was consistently themed around the existential threats of migration and the green energy agenda to Western nations and their heritage, reflecting a blood-and-soil nationalism. Political audience. Many commentators suggested that while delivered to world leaders, the content and tone were primarily aimed at thrilling his domestic political base and antagonizing his critics. Fact-checking and news organizations concludes that the speech contained a mix of rhetorical attack, misleading statements, and claims that were outright false, suggesting he was, at least in part, playing to the gallery by globalizing his domestic political themes. Here is a fact-check breakdown of his most prominent claims. 1. Claims on migration and UN funding, largely false or misleading. The UN is funding an assault on Western countries by providing cash and resources for migrants to infiltrate the US and Europe. False. Fact-checkers found no evidence that the United Nations is intentionally funding or organizing illegal migration into the United States or Europe. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, and other related bodies provide humanitarian aid, food, shelter, cash assistance, to refugees and asylum seekers globally, often in transit countries or refugee camps, which is a standard part of global humanitarian operations. Irregular migration to Europe is an invasion and is rising like nobody's ever seen before. Misleading, false. Preliminary data from the EU's Border Control Agency, Frontex, showed that irregular border crossings from January through August 2025 were down by roughly 20% compared to the same period in 2024. While irregular migration remains a significant political issue in Europe, the number of asylum applications had already peaked years earlier, in 2015. European countries are going to hell due to their immigration policies. Rhetorical. This is a highly rhetorical and subjective statement of political opinion rather than a verifiable fact. Fact-checkers noted that he was using his political language to aggressively lecture sovereign nations about their policies. 2. Claims on climate change and green energy, largely false. Carbon footprint is a hoax and the push for green energy is a scam. False. The concept of the carbon footprint is a standard scientific measure of greenhouse gas emissions. The scientific consensus on human-caused climate change is overwhelming, and green energy technology is a verifiable industry. Trump's labeling of climate science and renewable energy efforts as a hoax or scam contradicts decades of established climate science. Green energy is destroying Europe and will cause countries to fail. Misleading. While the transition to new energy sources presents economic and logistical challenges and has been a source of political debate and high energy prices in some European countries, there is no evidence to suggest that the move toward a green economy is destroying or causing countries to fail. 3. Claims on foreign policy successes, largely misleading. I have ended 7 unendable wars in just 7 months. Mostly false, misleading overstatement. While the Trump administration played a role in brokering temporary ceasefires or peace declarations in several conflicts, e.g., between Israel and Iran, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Cambodia and Thailand, etc., the term ended 7 unendable wars is a significant overstatement. Many of these conflicts were either 1. Temporary truces, often fragile and contested, not final peace deals. 2. Not full-scale wars in the conventional sense, or not at risk of an imminent full-scale war, like Kosovo and Serbia. 3. Still saw ongoing fighting, like in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. Conclusion. The analysis indicates that on substantive, verifiable issues like migration trends, the role of the UN in border control, and the nature of climate change, Trump's speech relied on claims that were factually inaccurate or highly misleading. The content was thus perceived by many analysts as a political performance playing to the gallery, specifically his domestic base and like-minded nationalist leaders abroad, by framing complex global challenges, migration, climate, multilateralism, as existential threats driven by globalist enemies, using extreme, unverified, or exaggerated data and rhetoric, going to hell. Hoax, scam, over substantive policy details, boasting of highly exaggerated foreign policy achievements, ending 7 wars.
Thank you for watching. This is Chokitable Media. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Like and love and share it to your loved one as well. God bless you as you do. See you next time.